Hello, lovelies. I am Vesper the Evening Star, and I'll be your host today here on Vesper's Fanfiction Time. Now, today I have a brand new story that I'm going to be reading for y'all, and let me just say, I am utterly in love, and you will be too. You are just going to be on the edge of your seat the entire time with your heart palpitating a little bit. Like, when I was reading this, I was like, oh my god, and I'm still on the edge of my seat, because this author is such a good writer, and they just set up the scene and story so perfectly, and you just get trapped in their head. But anyways, stuff like this is for the end. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into the story. The Room E42, A Shelter in Midst of Pain, by iiasterflower. Summary. Survival. Continuation of existence in the face of adverse conditions. Protection. Act of defending or protecting someone from harm. Connection. A deep, unique bond between two individuals that transcends the physical and emotional. Izuku wakes up in a colorful, childish room with no memory of how he got there. Why him, an 11-year-old boy with no gift, has never been considered valuable in a society that idolizes the strong. But what puzzles him the most is not his own capture, but the presence of a baby, too young to comprehend the horror of his situation, but whose vulnerability strikes Izuku with unexpected responsibility. With each passing second, the tension grows. With no answers and no visible allies, Izuku must confront the mystery of his confinement, devise a plan to escape, and protect the tiny creature who suddenly seems completely dependent on him. Amidst the uncertainty and danger, an inescapable truth rises. In this dark game, Izuku is the only hope for salvation. Or, Izuku wakes up in a room trapped next to a baby, not knowing why he was chosen or how to escape. Now, he must protect the little one and find a way out. Warnings before you begin. Please note that this story contains depictions of sensitive topics and serious issues that may be disturbing to some readers. Read and listen with caution. The story seeks to address these issues in a careful and respectful manner, highlighting human emotions and experiences in extreme situations. However, this may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised. The rabbit moves forward, though the path is gray. With firm steps, without looking back, courage burns in his chest, an endless fire, and hope is its guide, its only peace. But fate holds a dark veil, one it never saw coming in its race. A bitter, cruel, and harsh future, leaving scars it will never erase. Although it fights strongly, never giving up, the weight of uncertainty will make it fall, and though it keeps moving without fading, the future marks it beyond its understanding. Izuku knew the universe had something against him. Since he was 4 years old, his life had taken a complete turn, all because of one simple fact: 2 extra toes on his feet. That tiny extra joint marked his destiny and turned him into something far greater than just a physical defect. A waste of public space, an incompetent, a useless and ineffective, a loser, a mistake, a failure, a Deku. In a world where the strong dominate, where people with powerful quirks are the winners, he was a nuisance. Those without remarkable abilities, those who weren't special, were the losers, the ones at the bottom of the pyramid. Izuku wasn't even at the bottom of the pyramid. He was far below, crushed by the base. He was an outcast, an anomaly, something society looked at with pity, as if they already knew, since he was a child, that his future would be difficult, nearly ruined. As a small child, he didn't understand why the other kids didn't want to play with him just for being weak, why his best friend Kachan no longer wanted to be his friend and left him behind, why people stopped on the street just to stare at him with a mix of curiosity and pity before moving on. He also didn't understand why doctors could no longer see him, why they didn't have tools needed for kids like him. In his innocence, Izuku still didn't grasp the magnitude of his situation. His mother tried to protect him, to shield him from the harsh reality, and he, naive, clung to that bubble of safety, unaware that reality was lurking, waiting for the perfect moment to shatter it. It only took a few years before he decided to research the quirkless. And it was then, at the age of 7, that the bubble of innocence he had cherished so much burst. Kachan stopped being his friend. He couldn't bear to be near someone so weak, and his other friends abandoned him too. People stared at him on the streets, not because they were interested, but because his uselessness was evident, betrayed by his comfortable red shoes. They were shoes made by a brand specialized for people like him, people without quirks. And the doctors couldn't treat him. The laws imposed by a system that only prioritized those with abilities left the quirkless out of reach of most medical facilities. It didn't matter if someone was injured, sick, or needed urgent care. If you didn't have a power, your life wasn't worth as much. Izuku understood. Reality, so harsh, had caught up to him, and there was no escaping it. But Midoriya had something that any other child his age would have lost easily. Even with the unpleasant comments, the bullying from his classmates, and the dismissive gazes of adults, he still held on to courage, determination, and hope. He remained strong and steadfast, even if the world turned against him. At 8 years old, Izuku started putting more effort into his homework and exams. He spent hours at his desk, reviewing school topics over and over. His grades, which used to hover around 80 points, soon began to climb to 95 and 100. Midoriya was among the top of his class, but he knew that if he wanted to go far, he had to go beyond. So he decided to get ahead, studying topics from upcoming school years, advanced math, chemistry, algebra, physics. Everything fascinated him, as if every new formula or theory opened up a world of possibilities. Yunko watched him in awe. To her, it was strange seeing her son running excitedly from his room to explain how to solve a chemistry problem she didn't understand. But seeing the passion in her little boy's eyes filled her heart with joy. However, as always, the universe and society seemed determined to remind Izuku of his place. The problem with high grades was that they attracted attention, and not the good kind. When Kachan found out that Izuku had surpassed him in grades, he took it as a personal affront, as if the green-haired boy was belittling him. Katsuki's fury intensified. What once had been verbal bullying quickly turned physical. And so fear was born. The fear of going to school, always being on guard. The fear of having to run out of the classroom as soon as the bell rang, hoping to avoid his bullies. The fear of entering the bathrooms, dreading being cornered. Once, some boys from another grade pushed him against a toilet, shoving his head inside. It only happened once, but Izuku would never forget the humiliation and despair he felt. He returned home with bruises and burns that he hid from his mother, making up excuses to explain his torn clothes. His teachers, instead of helping, preferred to look the other way, or worse, blame him, tarnishing his record with accusations of misbehavior. To find a bit of peace, Izuku made a painful decision. Lower his grades, keeping them just a few points below Kachan's. It was his way of surviving. But outside school, his thirst for knowledge remained intact. He kept studying at home, delving even deeper into advanced topics. He also further explored quirk analysis, a fascination that had begun when he was 5. Now, he searched for advantages that other heroes could exploit, even though he didn't have a quirk of his own. Additionally, he decided to learn how to cook. He asked his mother to teach him, wanting to lighten her burden. If he could prepare dinner, Yunko wouldn't have to worry about returning exhausted from her job as a nurse. He also took on household chores, washing and ironing clothes, and even sewing the small holes in his school uniform after a bad day. For a few months before turning 10, Izuku felt like he had some control over his life. But the universe, as always, had other plans. Everything changed that night Yunko didn't come home. Izuku remembers watching the clock, worried that his mother hadn't arrived for dinner. Hours passed, and his anxiety grew into a knot in his chest. Then someone knocked at the door. It was the police, accompanied by social workers. Some assailants had tried to rob his mother while she was on her way home. When they found her, she was lying on the ground, stabbed. Mom had died. Though they tried to help her, they weren't fast enough to get her to the hospital, so she died on the way. The following weeks were a blur. Izuku spent some time in foster care with other children. Some tried to be kind, but when they found out he was quirkless, the bullying began. It was Satoshi, the boy with the power to control minds, who stood up for him. Izuku would always remember him for that. His aunt Mitsuki tried to take custody of him, though the idea of living under the same roof as Kachan scared him. Part of him found comfort in staying close to rather something familiar. But before it could be finalized, social services announced that Izuku's custody had to go to his father. His father. Izuku shared the same last name as the man, but had never met him. His mother always avoided talking about him, and when Izuku asked, Yunko became uncomfortable, dodging the questions. It was an unspoken rule between them. They wouldn't talk about him. But that day, a rule was broken. At 9 years old, Izuku met his father. Hisashi Midoriya was an adult version of himself, with black hair instead of green, a serious expression, and dark circles under his eyes that spoke of a man consumed by work. He didn't seem excited about meeting his son or taking on the responsibility of raising him. When Mitsuki and Marsura tried to talk to him about custody, Hisashi firmly refused. He took Izuku and told him to hurry. They'd miss their flight to Fukurua if they didn't leave immediately. Izuku said goodbye to his aunt, uncle, and Kachan, his heart full of uncertainty. During the flight, father and son didn't exchange a single word. Izuku felt guilt growing inside him, thinking that his existence was just another burden for the man who barely recognized him as his child. Izuku's new home was impressive. It was a massive apartment in one of Fukurua's best neighborhoods, something he hadn't expected at all. Every corner spoke of luxury and comfort. A spacious dining room, an elegant living room, a kitchen equipped with all kinds of modern appliances, 4 bedrooms with private bathrooms, a general bathroom, and a study that belonged exclusively to his father. It was too much for a child like Izuku, who barely knew how to adjust to so much space. Hisashi didn't show much interest in his life, which didn't bother Izuku. On the contrary, he felt relieved. The questions were basic: his name, his age, and minor details. His father didn't ask about his quirk, making Izuku suspect that either he didn't know he was quirkless or simply didn't care. Without much enthusiasm, Hisashi showed him around the house and pointed out his room. He also mentioned that he worked most of the day, often late into the night, and could even be away for days at a time. Still, he assured Izuku he'd have everything he needed. "Do you prefer to attend a local school or study online?" he asked. Izuku, still fearful of bullying, chose the latter. His father didn't seem surprised. In fact, he seemed to prefer that decision. A few days later, Hisashi fulfilled his promise to equip him. He bought Izuku a laptop and a phone to stay in touch in case of emergencies. He also established one rule: never enter his study or snoop around his work. Izuku didn't hesitate. The last thing he wanted was to cause problems. He had learned, after all, that curiosity could be dangerous. For nearly a year, their relationship was distant but functional. They barely saw each other. Hisashi returned home very late and left very early. However, through small gestures, Izuku knew his father cared. The pantry was always full. There was enough money for anything he might need, and the apartment's comfort was undeniable. During this time, Izuku learned an important lesson. First, the truth about his father. He discovered that Hisashi was a brilliant man with an IQ of 197, a distinguished doctor, psychologist, and scientist. Although his quirk Fire Breath was powerful, his father kept it inactive, which inspired both admiration and disappointment in Izuku. Second, how to manage his grief. The first days after his mother's death were unbearable, but over time he learned to bury his emotions deeply to keep going. He reminded himself that his mother would want him to be strong. and that kept him moving forward. Third, he initially enjoyed the autonomy of his father's absence gave him. He could eat sweets for breakfast and stay up late watching cartoons, and live without scoldings. But that freedom soon revealed its dark side. Loneliness. There was no one to care for him, no one to hug him at the end of a bad day. Izuku had to learn to be self-sufficient, cooking his own meals and walking alone to the store. And fourth, online school was the best thing ever. His dedication allowed him to advance 3 years in his studies, completing nearly all of middle school in just a few months, and for the first time in a long time, he felt proud of himself. Though he missed his mother deeply, and he was determined to make the most of this new chapter. After all, he was a big boy now, with many freedoms, and he wasn't going to waste them. During this time, Izuku began meeting his father's co-workers, each with unique personalities and quirks that left an impression on him. The first was Akanami Jumi, a cheerful and extroverted 39-year-old who made sure Izuku's new home was in order. Junbin, with his quirk, Living Spark, which allowed him to generate small sparks in his hands, was warm and brotherly, always lighting the mood with a joke. Then there was Tsukiki Jimiya, a 43-year-old woman with a mutant appearance that made her look younger. Her violent skin, fins instead of ears, and gills on her cheeks and neck that made her stand out. Her quirk let her breathe underwater, and her extremely sensitive hearing was a rare gift among mutants. Mia was protective and maternal towards Izuku, providing him with much-needed emotional support. Finally, there was Kurero Kugura, a mutant with jet black skin like shadows and piercing red eyes. His quirk, Shadow Cloak, allowed him to move stealthily. Though reserved, Kuruga spent time teaching Izuku the basics of physical combat, lessons that Izuku deeply valued. By the time he was 11, Izuku achieved an impressive milestone. He completed all his online schooling. When his father realized this, he began to recognize his son's extraordinary intelligence. He gave Izuku exercises and problems designed for much older individuals, but Izuku solved them with ease, surpassing all expectations. Gradually, Hisashi started paying more attention to Izuku's interests and talents. His meticulous analysis, love for knowledge, and future dreams. Dinner at home became a small ritual. Some days, Hisashi invited his co-workers, filling the apartment with brief but lively conversations and laughter. Izuku, always in charge of preparing the meals, cherished every moment. After so long of feeling alone, those dinners reignited a spark of happiness, though loneliness had become his constant companion. Those gatherings reminded him of what it felt like to belong. For the first time in months, he felt that this place could be his home. Izuku was happy. But as always, every time he believed he could embrace happiness, the universe reminded him that it wasn't meant for him. Just as the loneliness began to fade and hope returned to his heart, everything crumbled again. October 15th wasn't just another day. It was the day his fragile, carefully rebuilt world shattered once more. It marked the start of a chapter that would change him forever, one filled with shadows and fear. That day, Izuku was kidnapped. And that is all for chapter 1, folks. So with this story, some of the chapters are a bit longer, a bit shorter, but I think y'all are going to enjoy them. What I plan to do is kind of have it like a situation with I'll Be Your Hero at the Cost of Everything, although these are not quite as long as those chapters, because I'm currently trying to still like record those episodes and chapters for I'll Be Your Hero at the Cost of Everything, and those are running well over 45 minutes, so be prepared for some longer uploads soon. But this is definitely one of my new favorites. I'm so invested, and you will be too. And I truly think this needs a ton of more kudos and stuff. And just, I was shocked. I was like, are people not like reading this? Hello? It's just phenomenal. And the author was so kind to speak to, and I'm just beyond grateful. So please check this out, y'all. This needs way more hits, and just, oh, it's so good. But as always, folks, have a good morning, good day, good night, good afternoon, and I will see y'all next time. Mwah. Bye.